I want to ask you to join me in welcoming our second keynote for the day. Now, Ian said her name's super fancy, but where I come from, it's Florence, so I hope that works. Florence Bergeron is the research manager for the Students' Commission of Canada. Nice. And she is really driven to ensure that results and data are accessible, available, and shared in order for communities, policies, and program people to make use of them, to make data-driven decisions. So can you join me with a big round of applause for Florence as she takes the stage? Welcome, Florence.
Thank you. Okay. Hi everyone. So my name is Florence. Flo is fine. That's French, English, sounds the same. I come here today from unceded territories of the Huron-Wendat people, or Quebec City. So quite a traveling journey to come here, but I'm very excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm the research manager at the Students' Commission, but what brings me today here is in my other tasks. So it's not quite related, thank you, to my day-to-day, perfect, yeah, to my day-to-day job. But yeah, oh, I think that's the end of it. No worries. Yeah, so just before I get started, so I'm research manager. My job and the day-to-day is really with our research and evaluation department. So we are always keen and we have access to young people's voice, young people that are amazing and have amazing things to say. And one of our big goals at the Students' Commission is to hear these voices, empower them, amplify them, and to help youth move towards a positive adulthood. So my day-to-day job is really focused on that team, supporting them to carry out with our data collection activities. However, we also do a lot of other things in our national nonprofit. So we have obviously youth activities, youth programming, we have annual conference for young people. It's very amazing. And we also have a whole department of what we call knowledge in action. So this department is really trying to take the research, take the data, take the youth voice that we hear, and to share it, disseminate it, put it to the world so that it's not just with us. Although we are very happy to hear that, we want to share it back. We do that with our own research, but also with other projects. One of them is the Blueprint for Action. So we had been contracted by the Public Health Agency of Canada to help them disseminate this model that I will be sharing with you today. So just know that this is not necessarily coming from the Students' Commission, but we did put our little Students' Commission magic in it, especially reinforcing the youth engagement within the model. As I was hearing this morning, the talks, I heard a lot of strategies, a lot of questions, a lot of, thoughts, comments that fits in this model. So I know that I'm not going to be teaching you new stuff completely. My goal today is just to give you some framework to think differently, to approach it this problem in a very holistic way. Substance use, substance abuse, the harm related to that are very complex. There are many of them, and they're not as easy as just stopping. And so for complex problems, we need complex solution. Not complicated, complex. And so this is what this model is trying to achieve. And you will see soon when I get into it what I mean by that. I am in no way a substance use expert, substance prevention expert, and I'm certainly not a Yukon expert either. So I'm not here to tell you, to give you answers, to give you solutions. I'm not here to tell you I have a magic recipe for all our problems to be disappearing. I'm just here to help you have these conversations and get a framework for our conversation that will be happening later today and tomorrow. I will have some time at the end for the questions, but also I like this presentation to be dynamic. So if at any moment there is a question that sparks about one of the pieces I'm talking about, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll try to get to it right on the spot. Okay, so yeah, okay. So what is the Blueprint for Action? The Blueprint for Action is a model, like I said, that was developed by the Public Health Agency of Canada. So they started the work actually in 2019, I believe. There was a few phases of this project, but what was the key point for this model to happen was at a forum, so the School Matter Forum in February 2020, where over 50 diverse school stakeholders, and that includes young people, were brought at the table to discuss substance use and how we can prevent potential harms. And so they created this model. It's a 35, 40 pages manual with a lot of information. And then they were asking us, the Students' Commission, to help them make it more accessible so that people can get the information without reading the whole 40 pages. So you're welcome. And it brings together, it's not reinventing the wheels. It brings together models and framework that we already know, but it just put them together in a very different way that we haven't seen before. So it brings the comprehensive school health framework and 4 intervention strategies. And the purpose, like I said a bit earlier, is really to inform comprehensive and concrete action plans and strategies. It's to encourage different ways of thinking about how to approach youth substance use, and it's to support stakeholders to engage in their network. In other words, it's to help us collaborate. Because again, to complex problem, complex solution, and it's not going to be only one person being able to do that. We'll need collaboration. We'll need different experts coming in at different points and giving their own to our plan for this plan. So before we start, and I mean with the presentation we had earlier with Ian and Jennifer, they went over this, especially more specifically for Yukon, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but it's just to lay out the ground. So substance use is associated with a range of potential harms. However, this is a range. And here, at least in my presentation, when I say substance, I'm thinking about all the potential substances: tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, opioids. So it's very broad, right? So with different substance comes different risks. And we just have to keep in mind that whole spectrum, that whole range. Yes, there are some very, very harmful, risky things, consequences that can come up, but also some less risk depending on the substance use itself. Youth are more vulnerable than adults to substance-related harms for multiple reasons. One being biological predisposition. Youth are not the same build as adults. They are in a stage of very important developmental stage, and so substance can have much more impact on them. But they are also in social and emotional developmental stage that are very different and made them more keen to have unhealthy behavior or to push to an extent their substance use without necessarily realizing it. Sorry. Okay, so like I was saying, substance use is risky. I think we can all agree to that. However, these risks are not fixed. Like I said, it's a spectrum. So it's not completely irreversible. Sometimes depending on where we are, but I mean, you know, since there are so many different consequences or harms related to substance use, there are also potential of changing that and moving away from these risks. They are not fixed. It's not because we used once that it's over. And substance-related harms are influenced by social and structural factors that are very unique in every single community in Canada. And so they have to be taken into consideration when thinking about strategies. So with all of that, the good news is that substance-related harms can be reduced. And that's what this model is trying to do. And I know that this is what you all are trying to do as well. So what is the Blueprint for Action? The Blueprint for Action is a model that supports school community members to plan and implement strategies to prevent substance-related harms. So it's grounded in evidence, both research evidence and also practice-based. It reflects students' diverse needs and experiences, and it maximizes levers within school communities. So like I said, this model is very flexible. It's only a framework to think. It is not prescriptive. It is not a list, a recipe with do A, B, and C, and then you're all good. Because we know in Canada, our country is so big, communities have so different needs, it wouldn't make sense to have a one-size-fit-all model. So it is just a framework to think differently. And basically, this chart there, the map that you see, is the model. So just it's 16 spots that you can fill in, and that brings a much more complex and holistic approach to substance use. So complex problems, complex solutions, rather than having focusing only on one strategy at a time. So the first piece that we see on the side of the chart is the Comprehensive School Health Framework. So this framework is a holistic approach to build healthy school communities. In Canada, it was mostly promoted by the Joint Consortium on School Health. And so they are a big promoter of that specific framework. And what it does, it just shows the interrelated component of addressing and implementing intervention for health in general. So yes, for substance use, but also for other mental wellness, physical health, anything health related in schools. We have to bear in mind that these 4 different components are playing a role and are affecting one another. So first we have teaching and learnings, curriculum, exactly what we teach in class, but also how are our teachers further supported in professional development? How is the school principal further supported in personal development? How are we on the school board level having these teaching and learning? How are we approaching it? And yes, the content of the curriculum, but also how we do education. Then we have policies. Policies, yes, of course, at the school board level or even the government level, but also within the classroom or within your program. Policies are any set of rules, any set of guidelines that we agree on or not agree on, but that are there and that dictate how we do our work. Social and built environment. Social, every relationship between students and teachers, youth themselves, teachers themselves, with families, with parents, with school boards, with other partners in the community. And also built environment, the grounds and buildings. Are these good? Are they safe? Are they accessible? Do we have a gym? Do we have a space for youth to hang out? Is the way between home and the school, is it safe? Is it accessible or not? All these things can have very important impact on the general school health, or actually how the strategies. And finally, partnership and services. What are the partners and the service available within school, but also within the community that we can partner with? How can we reinforce and use what is available in the community to support teachers, to support schools that are lacking in resources? How can we bring in communities, bring in elders, bring in pharmacists, nurses, to help support and to share the work? And so they all affect each other. You could have the best curriculum in the planet. If you don't have a nice environment, if youth are not feeling safe in their school, if they don't trust their teacher, never gonna land. You could have the best policies, the best model for substance prevention. If you don't have partners to help you implement it, if you're alone trying to put it forward, not gonna work. A very good example to illustrate that was COVID. When COVID hit, new policies. Everyone go back home, we do school online. That affected deeply teaching and learning, how we approach teaching and learning to our young children. So we move online, we try to adapt our best, but then within their house, at home, in the social and built environment, some youth really didn't have the best environment to learn. It was noisy, other students, their siblings also having schools, their parents being home, lots of distraction. So how did that affect the teaching experience? And how partnering and trying to use the service available, we're able to sometimes, in some cases, palliate to that, and other cases failed to help us do that. So it's really about translating conceptual approaches into practical and concrete school-based action, and to identify the assets and the gaps within school communities and see how we can manage that. So far, so good? No questions?
Well, we can't open for questions now. We'll never get done.
Okay. So in a nutshell, evidence-based substance use education is, yes, one component of comprehensive approach for preventing substance-related harms among youth. However, there are other important aspects to take into account, such as policy, social and built environment, and partnership and services. Okay, now we're going into the top of the chart I showed you earlier. So the 4 intervention strategies. Again, like I said, I don't think when you see these right now, you're like, yeah, I know. Yeah, okay. So not teaching you anything new. It's just seeing them together and how they interact. Other approaches tend to see them very streamlined, narrow perspective, only focusing on one thing at a time, where this one put them together. So, upstream prevention. And I'm not gonna spend too long on that because you're gonna have a nice 1 hour tomorrow specifically on upstream prevention with Planet Youth. But quickly, upstream prevention just aimed to address root causes of health issue or behavior. We're boosting protective factors and minimizing risk factors. It's often not explicitly linked to substance use. It can be something else that do not feel like substance related at all, but you never know how it can impact. One good thing to help think through upstream prevention is the 5 why exercise, where you simply ask the question why to each of your answer 5 times. So why is someone using X substance? Are they trying to cope for anything? Oh yeah, they have social anxiety. Where is that social anxiety coming from? Why? Is there bullying in school? Is there other types of discrimination? Why? And so on and so forth. When I gave this presentation in another space, someone asked me, why 5? Why are we stopping at 5? Or why are you going up to 5? That's a very good question. I think 5 is obviously a totally subjective number. It's a good exercise because sometimes the 5th one is getting much harder. So the harder it gets, the better the closer to the root cause you're getting. However, in some cases, you could continue on for probably 20 otherwise. But that's the thing is not really about the number of times you ask why, but it's what you do with each why that you're asking. Because each of them is a level, is a pinpoint that you could prepare a strategy for. So each time you're asking why, you're actually identifying something that we could be working on. Maybe not you specifically, but just an aspect that could be worked on. So yes, we can continue the why for 20 and get to the root of, poverty, for example. But also you can do other things much before that. You don't have to wait until you're to the deep root to do something. You can do prevention at many different levels. However, it's important to not stop at the first one either. because there are more than that. There are more than just using substance. Example of strategies towards that is, for example, having after-school programs, art-based sports, very implemented in communities, have youth do things, having programs that promote work or volunteering so that they feel a sense of purpose. It could be also giving them a space that they can decorate in the school or in the program, and asking youth themselves. So yes, you can figure some whys, but ask them directly. They will provide information that you could never get. Ask them what they want to do, what would make them feel safe that we can boost. Involve them in the decision making, involve them in making the space, making the relationship good for them. The next one, harm reduction. So harm reduction aimed to reduce the potential social and health harms without promoting or requiring non-use. This strategy aims to get away from abstinence-based. So as we said earlier, the Dare's Just Say No program, we're ready to stay away from abstinence, or actually from promoting abstinence, because evidence shows that it doesn't work. So we are not promoting that. Obviously, abstinence is probably the only best way to avoid all potential harms related to substance, right? But again, not realistic. So let's put that aside. How can we support healthy behavior without forcing them? Meeting people where they're at is very important here. For some people, using substance is a coping mechanism, and if they don't use substance, something even worse may happen. So let's start from there. Let's start from, okay, this is helping in some ways. This cannabis use is helping with chronic pain. Let's start there and see how we can make baby steps if there is an abuse in that consumption. Drinking alcohol helps them with XYZ. Let's start from there without saying you have to stop, because that could be really triggering for other things. For some other people, abstinence will be the solution because they have a history of abuse, dependencies, and consuming again is not an option. And that's also okay. We just have to meet people where they're at. And we have to celebrate small positive changes in behavior. My colleague, who usually gives these talks with me, likes to share a concrete example he had. So he was working with a young person who was a really heavy drinker. And at some point, it was becoming an issue on health, on financial, on many different levels, and they wanted to decrease their consumption. And all their friends were saying they had to stop, and they were not able to stop. So they said, okay, I'm gonna drink only on the weekend. And all their friends or adults were saying, that's not gonna work, you're gonna go over, you're never gonna be able to stop if you do that. Well, my colleague instead said, that's a great first step. Good job. Is it working? And just by celebrating that, just by acknowledging that this is a first step, this is something that is already difficult for the young person, help them get through it and get through with it. And yes, now they've been sober, I think, and they were back on track with their life. So just having someone say, yeah, good job. Okay, that's great. Celebrate that first step, celebrate what they're able to do at that moment, help them move forward. Oh, harm reduction also can be very on the individual level, obviously, so meeting people individually, but can be also in higher level, more social system levels. For example, I know that some communities, some school communities in Manitoba have been moving away from sending back youth that are coming in school intoxicated, because sometimes school is the safest, or should I say the least unsafe space in their lives. You don't know what is happening at home, and maybe sending them back home can be much more harmful. So they are trying to find ways to keep young people that are intoxicated in school, because at least they're in a safe space and they know that, you know, they're here, they showed up, and that's a good thing. And I'm going to come back to that example later for other of the approaches. Third one, stigma reduction initiative. So stigma, negative stereotyping of people. Yes, stigma around substance use itself, but also any other stigma that you may think of, any identity aspect that brings up stigma, that brings up stereotype, and that people label as us versus them. Let's move away from that. That's a huge, huge problem because it creates groups, it creates dichotomy, and it also creates barriers to conversation, barriers to access to resources. We aim to make the space open for open, informed, and non-judgmental conversation about substance use and about other things that could be related. If you go back to the root things, you know, if there are other stigma in the community that could be linked in some way to substance use, also making the space for that. Creating opportunities to exchange credible, practical information and advice. Sometimes stereotyping, stigma actually comes from not knowing, as simple as that. We don't know better. We based our information on things we've learned online, on social media, from other people, from our families, our government cultures, some cultures that say some stuff about other cultures. So it's often a question of unlearning what was learned, and what we don't know, we don't know. So having these spaces where we can be non-judgmental and have this exchange of credible information and explain where these things are coming from can be very good. In our conferences, when we hear things that can be harmful, that are anchored in stereotyping, we often ask why or where are you coming from with that? And it can be, sometimes it can be hard because they said something that you know inside of you, oh, that's not good, that's not, no. But not calling them out, actually calling them in and asking them, where are you coming from with that information? And by having them explain where that thinking comes from, sometimes we'll identify where we should start the conversation, or sometimes they will actually realize themselves that their belief is not maybe credible or might be flawed, right? So really trying to be non-judgmental and bring the conversation in the middle. So it really helps to enhance social emotional assets and skills such as empathy, sensitivity, and compassion. And by reducing stigma, we are promoting inclusion and making students or youth feel comfortable sharing their experience. And it's not going to be easy. I'm not pretending it's as easy as that. But sometimes it's just about changing vocabulary, simple word change. For example, drug overdose versus drug poisoning. Just that shift of language has shown very promising results in hospital or medical settings, where overdose seems to bury the fact that the person had control and put that on themselves to have an overdose, whereas poisoning remove that aspect of the self. It's the substance, it's the drug that put them in that state. And we know that substance abuse and substance disorder are often not as simple as willpower and stopping whenever you want, right? It's much more complex than that. And so when someone is having an overdose, it's actually a substance poisoning. And the response by nurse and by doctors in hospital where they tried to do that change was much more positive, in the sense that they were taking the cases more seriously than using the word overdose, where they had that stigma of, oh, this is a substance user. They did that on themselves, and yeah. Okay. Fourth and last strategy or approach, equity-oriented intervention. So equity, right, not equality, in the sense that we are not giving everyone the same thing. Again, going back to meeting people where they're at, we're actually trying, we have one goal in mind, and we'll adapt the resource, adapt the services, adapt the support we give to people and where they're at. It's really about seeking to make institutions and systems more accessible, responsive, compassionate, and safe for all people. It's about developing policies, programs, and intervention that reflects individual diverse needs, preference, and life experiences. And two good examples of strategies like that are culture safety practices and trauma and violence informed practices. So culture safety practice is really about making sure that we celebrate cultures and that we keep in mind everything about that culture that could have been a barrier, and try to remove these barriers so that people can access services and support and resources that are relevant for their own culture. And trauma and violence informed practice is about trying to minimize re-traumatizing not old, but trauma, re-traumatizing by reliving and asking questions that can be triggering. It's also about stop saying what's wrong with you, and rather, where is this coming from? And okay, like, what is your history, rather than what are you doing, right? And so if I go back to my example in Manitoba of schools that are trying to keep folks that come in school intoxicated, one thing that came up, like the downside or one of the cons from that, was trying to not normalize being in school when you're intoxicated, right? So yes, you want to help the young people that are intoxicated. You don't want to put them back in a space where they might not be safe. But you also have a classroom of 30-something folks beside that are seeing this young person coming in intoxicated. How do you make sure that it's not normalized or not triggering for them? And so strategies could be, for example, having a space in the school where the youth that are intoxicated are are invited to stay. So they are not in the classroom. They are not other students do not necessarily see them actively, and it doesn't seem normal to be at school intoxicated, but at the same time, you have a safe space for these young people, and you maybe have also using the support from other school staff. Janitors are often underused. They can be very incredible resources. Again, my colleague that is usually with me told about a story where one time, one young people that was really having some, absent, he was often staying, not coming in school, and really struggled to stay focused in classroom, and so was also creating a lot of behavioral challenges. And one day they just matched him with the janitor. That young person spent the whole day with the janitor, running around the school and getting to know all these different places, like the cave and this I'm gonna say it, this room that nobody ever goes in except the janitor. And they were very interested, and that created an adult ally for that young person. And so when they were coming back to school after, they had that janitor to go back to if they had anything. And so using these resources can be very, sometimes it's more creative, but can be very useful. And so in a nutshell, the best prevention measure often have nothing to do with substance use at all. By improving overall health and well-being and reducing social and health inequities, we can achieve these goals. Efforts to prevent substance-related harms among youth must reflect individual schools and school communities' unique needs, values, preferences, and contexts. Engaging with teachers, families, school health nurse, other school staff, youth themselves, community members is key to creating these strategies. And so when we map everything out and come back to that chart that I had at the beginning, we can see 16 different strategies here that all share the same goal and share same values: compassion, equity, responsiveness, and can sometimes even look the same in practice. So it's not because you have something in the box of upstream prevention, teaching and learning that it only applies to that. It can also apply to other boxes or other aspects in the school. And don't worry, like we didn't come up with these 16 strategies within an hour. It took a team of many different people and many hours to think through these. And again, these are just examples. I'm not in any way saying that they are strategies that should be implemented. If it fits, that's great, but it's just to show how it looks like once it's filled in. And again, it should be filled in with things that are relevant for your community, for your school specifically. And so this model can seem complex, can seem a bit overwhelming, right? But it's actually very relevant and feasible. It has a greater reach and relevance than one-size-fits-all models because, like I said, it's more of a framework for thinking than actually concrete strategies. You will have to do the work. I'm not pretending that it's going to be easy, and I'm not, again, pretending I have the solution. I just have a framework so that together, collaboratively, we can think about different aspects of this issue and come up with various solutions, some that are short-term, easily implementable. Is that a word? Yeah, okay. And some others that requires more work, that are more long-term, that might require bigger shifts, but it's not because these things are not happening that nothing is happening towards our goal. When applied in combination, the model building blocks can support and reinforce each other. So doing one baby steps can actually reinforce one of these bigger strategies that are more complex. The 4 intervention approach have broad relevance, like I said, very flexible, very adaptable to the different communities. And the model can contribute to a range of positive outcomes for school communities. So yes, our end goal here is substance use related harm prevention, but it can also, if you create a program in your school to increase school belongingness, you're also touching on other aspects of health in general, right? Like this morning we heard the intersectionality of mental health and substance use. So touching on mental health can actually have impact on substance use as well. And finally, the model reflects a much needed shift away from the status quo. So again, you have a bigger vision of this field chart. I also have this chart in blank so that it can be filled, but I think it's just a nice chart to keep in mind when we'll have our conversation later today and tomorrow. And so many traditional approaches to addressing youth substance use, like zero tolerance policies, abstinence only education, have limited effectiveness and can produce unintended negative consequences. School communities should use the best available evidence to inform their effort to prevent substance-related harms and evaluate these initiatives on an ongoing basis. And we actually gave this presentation last week to another virtual event on substance prevention. And someone asked the question if we knew about a space where school communities can share initiatives, share strategies that they put in place and showed good results. And to my knowledge, it doesn't exist yet. However, I think that sparked some great interest in public health agency team. So this is something I think will be in the work in the future. However, you can do your own. I've heard some initiative, I've heard some strategy here this morning, and I think this could inform strategies and programs in other school and other communities. So even in a smaller scale here, we can already start that. We do have other resources available for this specific model. So we have that short talk. I have a 3 hours version that the health promotion unit did last year, actually. So we have a workshop that is much longer and go over or deeper into youth engagement after. So we do have that long workshop, but we also have a 2-page summary or 1-page back and forth that just goes over what I've said in a very succinct way. We have an infographic. It's a dynamic infographic. As you scroll down, information will pop up. There are some questions, some reflections, so that can be very interesting, the workshop. And then I've also been working with the Joint Consortium on School Health on other types of products, so they can all be found in our website. All of these actually can be found on our website. Even the 3 hours workshop, you have all the material publicly available. For the Joint Consortium, we did videos, informative videos for grades 6 to 8, for grade 9 to 12, and for adults. We have a discussion guide for teacher teaching more the elementary school, how to discuss substance use with young people. We also have a list of resources for each province and territories in Canada. So we listed at least one substance use related resource for each of them. And we are right now working again with Public Health Agency on a social media campaign on cannabis vaping. So that's going to be more wrapped up towards the end of the month. So you can keep an eye out for that as well. And the Students' Commission is very strong on strengthening the network. And so we are always very excited to create new partnership. That's one of the things I'm going to try to do this week. And so we are always there to support, always interested into new initiative that involves youth. So please reach out to us if you have questions or comments or ideas of youth-based initiative. Thank you.
Wow, that was a lot of information and super fast, so thank you. I just wonder, maybe I'll bug Ian and Jen, there's a lot of resources there. Are we able to send those out to registrants, people who've registered? Okay, so we're gonna send the framework information out to people who've registered. If you crash the party, don't worry. Just find your daughter or a friend. They'll share it with you. So I think we've got about 10-15 minutes for questions, comments. Anybody? This is always like, you know, when you're at the dance and somebody's got to dance first and then other people are like, yeah, I'll dance. Who wants to dance first? Wilford? Oh, deny. Oh, he's just thirsty. Okay, see, I'm on it. I'm eyes on. Jesse's going to ask folks online if they have any comments or questions. There's lots of big thank yous online. Amazing presentation, lots of good information. Good. Nobody wants to dance? Come on. Oh, Ian's gonna dance. Good job, Ian. Okay, the rest of you, come on. Can you go to the mic, Ian, because you're not as loud as me?
Thank you, Florence. I wanted to ask, I was at your Against the Current event last week, and there was a breakout or a whole stream based on the Planet Youth model. And we've got a few different Planet Youth sites in Canada now. I think there's 3. And there's so much in common between the Blueprint for Action and the Planet Youth approach. But the one point of kind of diversion, I think, is around the harm reduction approach. In Iceland, they seem to have really taken this attitude that no amount of drug use is acceptable. Kids are to stay kids until they're at least 18, and are quite critical of other countries where they've legalized cannabis, for example. I'm wondering how you've managed that in your relationship with Planet Youth and the Icelandic folks.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, that's the big aspect that differs from these two models. And so, well, one thing that I've heard from communities that are engaging in the need assessment piece of Planet Youth right now is that for them, not abstinence-based is just not an option because it's happening right now, right? And I think that this is the strength of this model, is that it's, yes, you can have prevention, but it doesn't have to be only that. And you don't have to wait until prevention works to see results. For the youth that are using, the people that are experiencing harm, having unhealthy behavior, abuse of substance, we have to do something right now. We cannot just like be, oh, too bad, well, we're focusing on prevention, right? We have to do something. And so the blueprint is trying to be more holistic and saying like, okay, yes, we have to do prevention effort. That's if we want to stop or reduce or limit the abuse and the harm, we have to do something in prevention. But what do we do for people that are experiencing it right now? That's the thing. And Planet Youth, like, so their approach is by having very extensive needs assessment with each of the communities. So it's very lengthy and long, but the model needs to be adapted to the communities where they go on. We are not Iceland, and so their specific approach might not, or will probably not work here if it's kept exactly the same. So right now in Lanark County and New Brunswick, that's the two I'm more aware of. I know that they're really trying to see how they can fit harm reduction within that the whole model.
Thank you for that. You can always ask the most hard, dig deep questions. Not like, what's your favorite color? Hey, just goes big. Any other questions or comments? Don't rush to the microphone, folks. So just maybe a comment. I think one of the challenges that we have is we're often looking for a silver bullet, right? That one piece that can help, and we know that that doesn't work. And I love that both you and Ian called out that, the don't do drugs doesn't work and the fried egg thing doesn't work. Those were funny commercials when I was growing up. But my question is, a lot of the framework that you've presented is initiated or is presumptive on this idea that you have multiple resources. And I come from a super small community. Like, we had one stop sign that we ran down in like the 80s, like super small. And I think we don't have a janitor, we don't have school nurses, we have one teacher who's also the principal, who's also the secretary.
Right.
And how does the framework work with those kinds of circumstances?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. And it's one question or comments that we had in almost all of our presentation. And I did this presentation almost 15 times across Canada with different people. So, I mean, I had it with teachers, I had it with decision makers, I had it with parents, I had it with social workers that are not in school settings, but are like working with youth. And so, but I think that the lack of resources right now is just something that is happening all across. And that's when the collaboration and relying on other service or other people in the community can be very useful. So, even involving parents in some of the programming and in some of, there was one example, I don't remember who or when, but they actually started having Saturday family workout in the gym, or just playing sport with parents in the gym. And so first that created like something to do in the weekend in communities where sometimes they didn't necessarily have a hockey team or other extracurricular activities. It reinforced belonging, family belongings, relationship. There was obviously other like school staff or other people helping these or facilitating these activities, and sometimes they were able to even do some sort of I don't want to say therapy session, it's just that's the only word coming to mind right now, but intervention within like family conflict. So just by having this open space on Saturday, and sometimes it was also a nice break for the parents, right, that were worried what am I supposed to make my children do on Saturday? Well, I can just bring them to the gym, and we can like to the school gym, and we can have fun together, and they can hang out with their friends, and I can hang out with other parents that I don't get to see. So, there are other more creative solutions. And again, I know that it's hard, and I'm not trying to say it's easy, and I don't have all the answers, but having these creative solutions, and sometimes it takes a village to raise a child, right? So get that community together, get these folks together in different spaces and rely on each other.
I like that. Thank you so much. Yeah. Do you want to please jump up to the microphone? No. Blair will tell you you always have to use a mic for the folks online. So nice try. But you can be a good dancer. There you go.
No problem.
Thank you.
I just wanted to speak to, I know a few communities in Yukon do still have prohibition or are intended to be dry communities. There's still a lot of people out there that do want to employ the abstinence approach to conversations. I work with youth through recreation, and that's been difficult conversations to have because I would like to start to really encourage responsible relationships with alcohol, but when you're in a community that really is not quite there yet. So how do we, as maybe a territory, as youth leaders, start to have those conversations within the respect of the community we might be in, while also wanting to engage in new methods of dealing with harm reduction?
Yeah, I had that also in other spaces. I know a lot of zero tolerance policies in schools too, in school boards, and it is very difficult. And it is a very good question. One piece I feel is, like I said, we had that presentation with different levels, right? So including some decision makers, and I'm hoping that by having this conversation even more and more coming, not just coming from you on the field, right, but coming from someone else, telling them like, hey, wake up. I'm hoping that's that one piece of the question there. However, for your day-to-day, it's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have an answer, but I think you can really focus on the relationship piece there with young people. And in your specific role, you have a very privileged space in these young people lives, and you can really use that to get the message across, even if it's on a more individual approach rather than having like, the overall implementation of the strategy. Does that make sense? I mean, yeah, it's a hard question.
Yeah, it's not straightforward, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of complexities there. It's a great question. Anybody else have a great question? It's good. All these sewers that are pulling their thread. I don't know if they're pulling their thread or they're waving at me. Just saying, sewers. Yeah, you good? Okay, can you join me in giving Florence a huge round of applause?